Greetings. This video is a book review of Ecce Homo by Friedrich Nietzsche. I have read this book and I'm going to talk about it, give you a review, give you a good idea of what the book is about, and help you understand Nietzsche and his work in Ecce Homo in particular. I think Ecce Homo is a book that requires prior familiarity with Nietzsche's philosophy. It's going to be hard to understand if you haven't read Nietzsche before or you don't know about Nietzsche's ideas, because when Nietzsche wrote Ecce Homo, he meant for it to be kind of his philosophical autobiography. So he assumes a lot of prior knowledge in his readers when writing Ecce Homo. So if you haven't familiarize yourself with Nietzsche's ideas, then it would be difficult to understand. But for me, since I know about Nietzsche's philosophical ideas before reading Ecce Homo, it was easy for me to understand. So I read the English translation of Ecce Homo. I read the Penguin Classics edition, as you can see here. And the original was written in German, but because both English and German are from the same Germanic language family, things translate pretty smoothly. There's not a lot, I think, that are lost in translation. I think everything I read is pretty clear in terms of language. In terms of ideas, that's another story, but in terms of language, it's pretty clear, and I think German is a language that conveys things explicitly and directly and in a straightforward way. So it's a good translation if you're reading the English translation. One more thing I want to say is that although Nietzsche intended Ecce Homo to be his philosophical autobiography, if you're reading this book to learn more about the personal life of Friedrich Nietzsche, I think it will disappoint you because it doesn't talk a lot about Nietzsche's personal life. It goes into some details here and there, and actually some of the details about his personal life in Ecce Homo is actually not true. For example, Nietzsche said that he is a pure-blooded Polish nobleman, but in fact, a lot of scholars have actually found Nietzsche's genealogy to be German. So if you're reading this book to learn more about Nietzsche's personal life, then it will disappoint you because you will not learn that much about his personal life, and the details you do read about his personal life may not even be true. However, if you want to learn more about Friedrich Nietzsche's life and work as a philosopher, then Ecce Homo would be a great book to read because it is Nietzsche's personal overview of his life and work as a philosopher. I think Nietzsche is a very profound and influential philosopher because his philosophy really is very unique and it's one of a kind. It really goes against other philosophies from other philosophers, and it goes against the established beliefs and values that dominated 19th century Europe that Nietzsche inhabited. It goes against a lot of Christian moralities that dominated 19th century Europe. And Nietzsche is from Germany, from the 19th century, so it was something that he was really concerned about. And I think it also goes against a lot of established moralities in other cultures as well. And you'll see why when you learn more about Nietzsche. But basically, Nietzsche's main primary mission was the revaluation of all values. He really wanted to go against the established values, the established moralities. And the way he describes it, I quote, is, "Mankind itself has become mendacious and false down to its deepest instincts, to the point of worshipping the inverse values to those which alone could guarantee it prosperity, future, the exalted right to a future." So in other words, he really wants to overturn the established beliefs and values and moralities of the time and return it actually to a more natural state. So actually I think, even though I would consider Nietzsche to be sort of contrarian and iconoclastic, in reality I think a lot of established moralities and beliefs are themselves contrarian and iconoclastic against nature, and Nietzsche wants to return our values, our beliefs, and our moralities back to nature. Instead of the values of selflessness, pity, and humility found in Christian morality, Nietzsche instead advocates for the values of strength, power, and nobility. He considers selfishness not as a bad thing, but instead as an attitude that seeks to preserve and advance oneself and one's own interests, as a self-affirmative attitude. And he writes, I quote, "When within an organism the meanest organ neglects even to the slightest degree to assert with absolute certainty its self-preservation, indemnity for its expenditure of force, its egoism, the whole degenerates. The physiologist demands excision of the degenerate part. He denies any solidarity with it. He is far from pitying it." The self-affirmative values that Nietzsche advocates for relates to a central theme in Nietzsche's philosophy, the struggle between master morality and slave morality. Master morality originates from the aristocracy, the ruling class, those with power, while slave morality, on the other hand, originates from the slaves, the lower classes, those without power. Master morality makes value judgments based on a good and bad dichotomy. What is good in master morality is basically what is positive and life-affirming. So things like strength, power, and nobility are considered good in master morality. And also things like wealth, beauty, courage, and happiness are good in master morality. Things that are bad in master morality are things that are negative and life-negating. So things like weakness, powerlessness, lowliness, poverty, ugliness, cowardice, and misery are considered bad in master morality. Nietzsche considers master morality as the more natural state of morality, and the morality that is more conducive to the advancement of higher human beings, higher types of human beings. It's the morality of the masters. A good master, a good aristocrat should be strong, powerful, and noble, and a bad aristocrat would be weak, powerless, and lowly. So, master morality is the morality of the masters. It's the morality of the best of humanity. So now let's talk about slave morality. Slave morality is the morality of the powerless. So slave morality makes value judgments based on a good and evil dichotomy. But what is good in slave morality is not what is good in master morality. In fact, it is the opposite, because slave morality is a revolt against the masters. It is full of ressentiment, which is Nietzsche's word for the sentiment of the slaves, the weak, the lower classes. And basically it means resentment and jealousy, but he uses the French word ressentiment. And slaves are full of resentment. So what is good in the master morality is actually what is evil in slave morality, because the slaves are full of resentment and consider their masters evil. They consider the strength, power, and nobility that their masters possess as selfish and egotistical. And followers of slave morality today would also use the word privilege to describe their evil oppressors. Basically, the evil people are the masters, and so the good masters, the good in master morality, the good masters are the evil oppressors in slave morality. They're the evil in slave morality. So what is good in slave morality? Basically, things that are good for slaves, things that make a good slave. So slaves' morality would value selflessness, pity, and humility, because a good slave should be selfless so he can better serve others. A good slave should be pitiful because his lack of power means he has to rely on the pity of others. A good slave should be humble because he can better submit to others. And other values that are considered good in slave morality would include forgiveness, patience, obedience, because a good slave should be forgiving because he lacks the power, the strength, and the courage to retaliate against others. A good slave should be patient so he can better wait on others and better serve others. And a good slave should be obedient so he can better obey his masters, obey others, and carry out their will. So basically what is good in slave morality is what makes a good slave. Nietzsche fully embraces the egoistic nature of master morality. He thinks that egoism is necessary for self-preservation, self-advancement, and the achievement of human greatness. And he wants higher types of human beings to embrace master morality, to embrace their egoisms, to achieve what they're meant to achieve their potential. And the struggle between master and slave morality is really the central project of Nietzsche's philosophy. He writes, and I quote, "All one had to do was to revalue all values in order to hit the nail on the head with regard to me, instead of hitting my head with a nail." End quote. Nietzsche adds, "Mankind is not of itself on the right path, that it is absolutely not divinely directed, that under precisely its holiest value concepts, rather the instinct of denial, of decay, the décadence instinct has seductively ruled. The question of the origin of moral values is therefore for me a question of the first rank, because it conditions the future of mankind. Hitherto, mankind has been in the worst hands, that it has been directed by the underprivileged, the cunningly revengeful, the so-called saints, those world calumniators and desecrators of man." Nietzsche believes that Christian morality is based on slave morality, and that slave morality is incompatible with an ascending and affirmative life. He writes, "At bottom, my expression immoralist involves two denials. I deny first a type of man who has hitherto counted as the highest, the good, the benevolent, beneficent. I deny secondly a kind of morality which has come to be accepted and to dominate as morality in itself, décadence morality, in more palpable terms, Christian morality. The overvaluation of goodness and benevolence by and large already counts with me as a consequence of décadence, as a symptom of weakness, as incompatible with an ascending and affirmative life." Nietzsche believes that slave morality corrupts and undermines the higher type of human being. He writes, "When a decadent species of man has risen to the rank of the highest species of man, this can happen only at the expense of its antithetical species, the species of man strong and certain of life." Nietzsche harshly criticizes the slave morality dominant in his time. He writes, "Everything hitherto called truth is recognized as the most harmful, malicious, most subterranean form of the lie, the holy pretext of improving mankind as the cunning to suck out life itself and to make it anemic, morality as vampirism." Throughout Ecce Homo, Nietzsche uses the term décadence morality to describe slave morality. The reason why is because décadence means decline, and Nietzsche considers slave morality as the morality of decline. Nietzsche also associates slave morality, or décadence morality, with Christianity and the priest. This is because he considers Christianity as a religion based on slave morality, and the values of Christianity, such as selflessness, pity, humility, patience, forgiveness, and obedience, are the same values of slave morality. And if you think about it, this makes sense because Christianity originated as a religion for slaves in Judea, in the Roman Empire, and it grew popular as a religion of slaves throughout the Roman Empire before it took over as the dominant religion in Europe. So it makes sense that Christianity is based on slave morality because it was originally a religion popular among slaves in the Roman Empire. Nietzsche associates the priest with slave morality because the priest is responsible for the religious and spiritual life of a society, and in the context of 19th century Europe that Nietzsche inhabited, the priest would be connected with Christianity, which Nietzsche considers as based on slave morality. But there's another reason why Nietzsche associates the priest with slave morality, and to understand why, you have to understand Nietzsche's prior writings before he wrote Ecce Homo. So on the genealogy of morals that Nietzsche wrote in 1887, Nietzsche associates the priestly caste with slave morality, and he associates the warrior aristocracy with master morality. So, if you have prior familiarity with Nietzsche's philosophy, you might also know that Nietzsche puts a big emphasis on physiology and health. And he believes that there is a strong connection between body and mind. A strong and healthy body is connected with strong and healthy instincts and sentiments. A weak and unhealthy body, on the other hand, is connected to weak and unhealthy instincts and sentiments such as ressentiment. And because the priestly caste is often prescribed unhealthy practices, at least in the context of Christianity, such as the counsels of perfection in Christianity, which prescribe poverty, chastity, and obedience, and also other practices for priests such as self-flagellation, limited diets, and sexual self-denial. This leads to physiological weakness. It leads to bodily weakness, and that is connected to weak instincts, because a weak body leads to weak instincts. So Nietzsche writes, and I quote, "It is not morality that speaks thus, it is physiology that speaks thus. Ressentiment born of weakness." So because the priests, if they truly follow the self-denying and ascetic practices of their religion, if they do that, they would be physiologically unhealthy. This ressentiment instinct would arise from them because body is connected to mind, and unhealthy body is connected to unhealthy instincts like ressentiment. Although Nietzsche associates the priestly caste with slave morality, it does not mean that he thinks most people are priests, because most people are obviously not priests. But slave morality has triumphed over master morality in 19th century Europe because most people are of the lower classes. So it makes sense that they would follow the slave morality that the priests preach. Furthermore, I want to emphasize that Nietzsche doesn't really explain his critique on the priestly caste in Ecce Homo. This is something he assumes from the readers, that the reader has prior knowledge on, because he wrote about it in his previous works. So if you read on the genealogy of morals, you would read about Nietzsche's critique on the priestly caste. Also, I have to say that Nietzsche also does not fully explain master morality and slave morality in Ecce Homo. He, again, assumes prior knowledge from his readers. So if you want to really understand master morality and slave morality from Nietzsche's writings, then read Nietzsche's other books, such as On the Genealogy of Morals. The reason why I explained it in this video is because it is such a central theme, a central project in Nietzsche's philosophy that it has to be discussed, and it's referenced so many times throughout the book that if you're watching this and you don't know about it, it would be hard to understand Nietzsche without really understanding it, which is why I am explaining it in this book review, even though it's not explained in this book. It is something that is assumed as prior knowledge by Nietzsche on his readers. So to really understand Nietzsche, you have to understand the concept of master morality and slave morality. It's alluded a lot in this book. It's not explained in Ecce Homo, but you have to understand it. And I also want to say that it is very clear in Ecce Homo that the revaluation of all values, or the struggle between master morality and slave morality, is Nietzsche's central project. And it's very clear if you read the last chapter, his concluding chapter, which is titled Why I Am a Destiny, because he opens and closes this chapter discussing this project, referencing this project. He writes, "I am dynamite," to reference that he is the destroyer of slave morality. He wants to bring out the destruction of slave morality. He is the dynamite that will destroy slave morality. He writes that hitherto the lie has been called truth, revaluation of all values. This is my formula for an act of supreme coming to oneself on the part of mankind. And that is the introductory paragraph of his last chapter. And the last paragraph of his last chapter of Ecce Homo also references the revaluation of all values. It connects to master morality and slave morality. Nietzsche writes, I quote, Finally, it is the most fearful in the concept of the good man, common cause made with everything weak, sick, ill-constructed, suffering from itself, all that which ought to perish, the law of selection crossed, an ideal made of opposition to the proud and well-constituted, to the affirmative man, to the man certain of the future and guaranteeing the future. The latter is henceforth called the evil man, and all this was believed in as morality. Nietzsche does discuss his other philosophical ideas in Ecce Homo. Another really major theme in his philosophy is the importance of physiology and the connection between body and mind and how the body affects the mind. A strong and healthy body is linked to strong and healthy instincts. A weak and unhealthy body is linked to weak and unhealthy instincts like ressentiment, which is why he wrote, "Being sick is itself a kind of ressentiment." In the chapter Why I Am So Clever, Nietzsche discusses how to nourish yourself so as to attain your maximum of strength. He says the best cookery is that of Piedmont, and that I cannot advise all more spiritual natures too seriously to abstain from alcohol absolutely. Nietzsche writes, there should be no eating between meals, no coffee. Coffee makes gloomy. And he advises the reader to sit as little as possible, credit no thought not born in the open air, and while moving freely about, in which the muscles too do not hold a festival. Nietzsche discusses the question of place and climate and how it's connected to metabolism and the body. And he writes, selectivity in nutriment, selectivity in climate and place. The third thing in which one may at no cost commit a blunder is selectivity in one's kind of recreation. In my case, all reading is among my recreations. Consequently, among those things which free me from myself, which allow me to saunter among strange sciences and souls. Nietzsche really emphasizes the importance of taste in terms of nutrition, healthy habits, place and climate, and recreation. He writes, in all this, in selection of nutriment, of place and climate, of recreation, there commands an instinct of self-preservation, which manifests itself most unambiguously as an instinct for self-defense. Not to see many things, not to hear them, not to let them approach one. First piece of ingenuity, first proof that one is no accident, but a necessity. The customary word for this self-defensive instinct is taste. Its imperative commands not only to say no when yes would be a piece of selflessness, but also to say no as little as possible. To separate oneself, to depart from that to which no would be required again and again. The rationale is that defensive expenditures, be they never so small, become a rule, a habit, lead to an extraordinary and perfectly superfluous impoverishment. Our largest expenditures are our most frequent small ones. Warding off, not letting come close, is an expenditure. One should not deceive oneself over this. A strength squandered on negative objectives. One can merely, through the constant need to ward off, become too weak any longer to defend oneself. Nietzsche really believes that these fundamentals of life are connected to someone's nature, which is why he believes that discussing these is very important, maybe even more important than discussing important philosophical questions. He writes, those things which mankind has hitherto pondered seriously are not even realities, merely imaginings. More strictly speaking, lies from the bad instincts of sick, in the profoundest sense injurious natures. All the concepts God, soul, virtue, sin, the beyond, truth, eternal life. But the greatness of human nature, its divinity, has been sought in them. All questions of politics, the ordering of society, education have been falsified down to their foundations because the most injurious men have been taken for great men, because contempt has been taught for the little things, which is to say for the fundamental affairs of life. I do not count these supposed preeminent men as belonging to mankind at all. To me they are the refuse of mankind, abortive offspring of sickness and vengeful instincts. They are nothing but pernicious, fundamentally incurable monsters who take revenge on life. I want to be the antithesis of this. It is my privilege to possess the highest subtlety for all the signs of healthy instincts. Nietzsche's emphasis on physiology, on the body, on health, highlights his understanding that the body and mind are intimately connected. He writes, my muscular agility has always been greatest when my creative power has flowed most abundantly. The body is inspired. Nietzsche does reference his other philosophical ideas in Ecce Homo, I won't go too much into detail on them. I covered his major themes, especially his central project of reevaluation of values, which he references throughout Ecce Homo. But if you want to look at the table of contents, the book is structured as follows. So first he has a few chapters about why he is so wise and clever and why he writes such good books. And then the next chapters are actually titles of the books he has written before. And he goes over them briefly. He doesn't discuss too much into detail. He talks a little about how he wrote them, how he came about writing them, and the writing process a little bit, and sometimes even where he was writing it and how that affected him. But he does not delve too deeply into the concepts themselves. So this is why Ecce Homo is not really a great book to read if you are not familiar with Nietzsche beforehand. The last chapter is about why I am a destiny, and it focuses on the revaluation of values, which we have already discussed. So all in all, I think Ecce Homo is a good overview of Nietzsche's life as a philosopher, his life and work as a philosopher. But I would not recommend it for the uninitiated. I would recommend it for people who are quite familiar with Nietzsche and his ideas before, and you'll get more of an overview of his works and more of his thoughts, some nice quotes from Ecce Homo, but it doesn't go too deeply into his philosophical concepts. For that, you have to read Nietzsche's other books. So I think in terms of the reading order of Nietzsche's books, I would say you should read Ecce Homo last, because it assumes so much prior knowledge from the reader that it's best read last, and it won't give you so much additional insights into Nietzsche's philosophy. For that, other books are better, but it does give you a good overview after you are familiar with Nietzsche's works, and it gives you a good summary of Nietzsche's philosophical works, and that is why I think it's the book best fitted to be read last in terms of reading Nietzsche. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy it, make sure to give it a like, subscribe to my channel, comments your thoughts, and all of this helps me in the YouTube algorithm, and I would really appreciate it. I will see you guys in the next video.